Have you ever felt like you've said, "I love you," 1,000 times, yet no one truly understands what you mean? Maybe it's because words aren't always enough. In today's video, you'll hear a simple story set in Denmark, where a girl and a boy who don't share the same language still manage to understand each other through glances, gestures, and quiet moments. A journey to discover how to say, "I love you," without words. Morning silence in Copenhagen. Copenhagen wakes slowly, like a cat stretching after a long sleep. The streets are calm, the air carries a hint of sea salt, and bicycles glide past quietly. In a small apartment near Nyhavn, a young woman named Sophie stands by her window, holding a cup of tea that's already gone cold. She watches the world outside, the gray light, the raindrops on the glass, and feels the same silence inside her heart. That it's not that Sophie dislikes mornings. She just doesn't like the loneliness that comes with them. Every sound, the kettle boiling, the distant church bells, reminds her of a time when someone used to say, "Good morning," back. But now, there's only the soft hum of the city, and the echo of a language she no longer needs to speak to anyone. You see, living in Denmark can feel peaceful, and painfully quiet. People mind their own space, and love stories are often whispered, not shouted. Sophie used to believe love was about words, the perfect sentences, the right tone, the courage to say them out loud. But after her last heartbreak, she started to wonder if silence might hold more truth than all the words she had ever spoken. So, every morning, she begins her day the same way, a cup of tea, a glance out the window, a deep breath, and the quiet hope that one day, someone will understand her heart without needing translation. Little does she know, that day is closer than she thinks. The stranger with coffee. It all began on a Thursday, the kind of gray, half-raining day Copenhagen is famous for. Sophie stopped by her favorite cafe near Nørreport station, a tiny place with foggy windows and the smell of roasted beans floating in the air. She sat in her usual corner, ordered her latte med havremælk, and opened her worn-out book. Not to read, but to look busy. That's when he walked in. A man, tall, slightly lost, holding his phone like a map that betrayed him. His hair was damp from the drizzle, and his accent, when he spoke to the barista, was not Danish. It was English, soft and unsure, like he was trying not to disturb the air around him. He sat across from Sophie because it was the only empty seat. For a while, they pretended the other didn't exist, two strangers sharing silence, both hiding behind coffee cups. But when she accidentally knocked over her spoon and he picked it up with a gentle smile, something small but real shifted in the room. "Tak," she said. "Thank you." He hesitated, then replied, "You're welcome." His Danish accent terrible but charming. She laughed, quietly, but enough for him to notice. That moment was nothing dramatic. No lightning bolt, no movie music. Just two people, both a little lonely, finding a pause in their routines. And maybe that's how real connection starts. Not with perfect words, but with the courage to look up and smile back. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, 2 cups of coffee grew cold. But for the first time in a long while, Sophie didn't feel so alone. Lost in translation. Over the next few days, the cafe became their quiet meeting point. No plans, no promises, just small coincidences that kept happening. He was always there around the same time, sitting by the window with his laptop open, pretending to work but mostly stealing glances when Sophie wasn't looking. His name was Liam, an English teacher from Ireland who had just moved to Copenhagen. His Danish was, well, a disaster. Every time he tried to say something beyond hedge or tack, it came out like a riddle wrapped in confusion. Sophie found it funny, and a little endearing. They started talking. Slowly. Awkwardly. Their English conversations were sprinkled with Danish words she couldn't translate and laughter that didn't need translation at all. Sometimes, Liam would point at things and ask, "How do you say this in Danish?" And Sophie would teach him, repeating patiently, giggling when he pronounced rodgrod med flowed like a broken spell. But here's the thing, when words fail, the heart improvises. They used gestures, eyes, and pauses. When she didn't know how to explain something, she'd draw on napkins. When he didn't know what to say, he'd just listen, really listen, the way people rarely do these days that it was clumsy. It was beautiful. And it reminded Sophie that maybe communication isn't about perfect grammar or vocabulary. It's about wanting to understand. Every mistake became a small memory. Every pause between them was filled with something tender, something that no dictionary could define. That in a city where everyone rushed to be somewhere else, they found a place where time seemed to slow down, between two coffees, two languages, and two hearts learning to speak the same rhythm. Love in 3 languages. One chilly Saturday morning, Sophie and Liam decided to walk through the King's Garden. The leaves had turned golden, the air smelled of cinnamon and wet earth, and Copenhagen felt like a painting that refused to fade. As they strolled under the soft drizzle, Liam suddenly said, "You know, I think I'm learning 3 languages here." Sophie looked at him, confused. 3? He smiled. "Yes, Danish, English, and yours." She laughed, but her heart skipped. Because he was right. Their conversations had become a blend of all 3, a strange, beautiful symphony of accents, glances, and gestures. Sometimes she'd say something in Danish just to hear how he'd try to repeat it. Sometimes he'd respond in English but with a tone so gentle that words seemed unnecessary. And then there were moments when they didn't say anything at all, just walked side by side, sharing the same silence like it was a secret. That it's funny how love doesn't always need translation. Linguists say that only 7% of communication is verbal, the rest is tone, body, and emotion. And in that sense, Sophie and Liam were fluent in something deeper, the language of presence. That he once told her, "When you speak Danish, I don't understand the words, but I understand you." And that was enough. Because love isn't about decoding every sentence. It's about feeling safe inside the silence between them. By the time they reached the statue of Hans Christian Andersen, she realized she hadn't checked her phone once. She didn't need to. The whole world was already there, walking beside her, smiling through the mist, speaking softly without a single word out of place. The power of silence. That afternoon, Copenhagen wore its favorite color, gray. The kind of quiet rain that doesn't chase you but stays with you, softly, like a loyal companion. Sophie and Liam walked along the lakes, their umbrellas bumping every few steps, laughter echoing under the drizzle. No music, no small talk, Just the rhythm of footsteps and the gentle sound of rain tapping on the cobblestones. There's a strange kind of magic in silence. Most people try to fill it, with noise, with chatter, with anything to escape the awkwardness. But not them. For the first time, Sophie felt no pressure to say something clever, and Liam didn't feel the need to impress. They were simply there. Two souls walking in the same weather, breathing in sync, saying everything without a single word. You know, scientists say that when two people share silence comfortably, it's one of the deepest signs of emotional connection. It means your nervous systems are in harmony. Your hearts literally calm each other down. Sophie didn't know that fact, but she felt it. Every time Liam smiled faintly at her, the rain seemed a little warmer. At one point, he stopped by the edge of the lake and looked at the reflection of the city lights rippling in the water. "It's beautiful," he whispered. She nodded, not trusting her voice. If she spoke, she was afraid the moment would break, and that's the beauty of love in silence. It doesn't demand. It listens. It breathes. It stays. As the clouds began to clear and the golden evening light spilled through, Sophie thought, maybe love isn't about finding someone who speaks your language. It's about finding someone who hears your silence. When words fail, eyes speak. A few weeks later, autumn deepened. The leaves turned copper and gold, and the wind carried the scent of cinnamon buns from the bakery on the corner. But along with the beauty came something Sophie couldn't name, a quiet fear. She could feel Liam pulling away, not in distance, but in time. His teaching contract was ending soon. His flight home was already booked. They didn't talk about it. Some truths are too heavy for words. Instead, they met as usual, coffee, laughter, walks, pretending not to hear the ticking clock between them. Every "see you tomorrow" started to sound like a small goodbye. One evening, they sat on a bench near the harbor, watching the sunset melt into the Baltic Sea. The air was cold enough to make their breath visible, but neither moved. Sophie wanted to say something, anything, but her throat refused. And maybe that was okay. Because when she finally looked at him, she realized his eyes were already saying everything she couldn't: gratitude, tenderness, sadness, love. You see, language can carry meaning, but eyes carry truth. When two people truly see each other, words become clumsy, unnecessary. Scientists call it nonverbal resonance, the moment two brains sync through emotion rather than speech. But poets? They simply call it love. Liam reached out, brushing her hair away from her face, his fingers trembling slightly. "I don't want to forget this," he said softly. "You won't," she whispered. "Neither will I." The city around them faded, only their eyes remained, speaking the last conversation. Their voices were too fragile to hold, and in that silence, they finally understood. Sometimes the heart doesn't need to say, "I love you." It just needs to be seen. The goodbye that stays. The morning of his departure came quietly, as if Copenhagen itself didn't want to wake up. The sky was pale, the air still. Sophie stood at the train station, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. Liam arrived with a small suitcase and that same gentle smile, the one that always felt like sunlight on her skin. There were no big speeches. No cinematic confessions. Just two people trying to hold on to a moment that refused to last. You'll keep practicing your Danish, right? Sophie asked, half smiling. Only if you keep practicing your English, he replied. They both laughed, a fragile laugh, the kind that breaks halfway through. Around them, trains came and went, people rushed by, the loudspeaker mumbled in Danish, and yet it all sounded like silence. He hugged her, and for a second, time bent, stretching longer than it should, holding them in a pocket of stillness that he didn't say, "I'll miss you." She didn't say, "Don't go." Some goodbyes don't need words. They're already written in the way two people let go. As his train pulled away, Sophie stood frozen, watching his reflection disappear in the glass. Once, twice, gone. And yet, his presence lingered, soft and invisible, like the aftertaste of coffee or the echo of a song you can't stop humming. Love, she realized, doesn't always end when people part. Sometimes it stays, in gestures, in silence, in the memory of someone who once looked at you and truly saw you. That's the kind of goodbye that doesn't fade. It just changes shape, from together to remember. Love beyond language. Weeks passed. The Danish winter crept in, long nights, dim light, and snowflakes that seemed to fall in slow motion. Sophie went back to her quiet routines, her morning tea, her window view, her walks through the city. But something inside her had shifted. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt full, like it was holding something warm, something invisible, yet alive. Every now and then, she'd hear someone speaking English on the street and smile without meaning to. Or she'd walk past the cafe where they met, and the barista would ask, "Ingen latte med havremælk I dag? No oat milk latte today?" She'd shake her head, laugh softly, and think, some memories don't fade, they just settle into your heartbeat. Love, she realized, wasn't about language, not really. It wasn't in the right grammar or perfect pronunciation. It was in presence. In listening. In daring to feel something you couldn't explain. Liam had taught her that you could say, "I love you," without ever opening your mouth. Through the way you look at someone, the way you stay when it rains, the way you remember even after goodbye. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us: learning to speak, to listen, to understand. Words matter, but hearts matter more. So next time you're afraid you don't have the right words in English, pause. Breathe. Look. Because maybe what you're trying to say is already shining in your eyes. Love doesn't always speak, but it's always understood. Maybe love doesn't always begin with hello, and it doesn't always end with goodbye. Sometimes, it lives quietly, in the space between two people who don't even share the same words, but somehow share the same heartbeat. This story isn't really about language, it's about understanding. About the moments when you don't need to speak to be heard, and when silence says more than 1,000 "I love yous." If this story found a little place in your heart, don't stop here. Because every story in this channel is a doorway to another emotion, another lesson, another piece of life told in English that you can feel. Watch the next episode, where we'll discover that sometimes, the people who change your life the most are the ones who never meant to stay. So stay with me. Let's keep walking through these stories, slowly, softly, and truthfully, until you realize that English isn't something you learn, it's something you live. Subscribe and turn on the bell. The next story might not just teach you English, it might change the way you see love.